You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. And now, it's time for the show that breaks down the options market from unusual activity alerts to market analysis, strategy overviews, listener questions, and much more. If it involves puts and calls, then our all-star panel will break it down. It's time to hit the Option Block with your host, Mark Longo from the Options Insider Media Group, and co-hosts, Uncle Mike Tusaw from St. Charles Wealth Management, along with Mark the Greasy Meatball Sebastian and Andrew the Rock Lobster Giovinazzi from OptionPit.com. And now, get ready to hit the Option Block.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back. Yes, it's a holiday in many parts of the states, but not in the markets. So not here for the network. We are back for a little bit of your bi-weekly options extravaganza known around the globe as the Option Block. My name, of course, Mark Longo from the THE OptionsInsider.com, as well as from the network upon which many of you were binging this weekend. A crazy, a tumultuous weekend once again here for the world as we head on into a new trading week. Of course, if you like what you hear on the network, anything else we do here, the app, you want to throw some stars, a like, a comment, maybe follow us on the old tubes. I know more than a few of you like to get your shows via the old YouTube. We don't judge, however you like it. Make sure you throw a like, a comment, or a star. It does help new people continue to discover the content. And of course, if you want to join us for great pro Q&A sessions, another one coming up tomorrow. I had a great one last week, delving deep into all the nuances of your trading psychology. What is causing you to let your losers run and cut your winners short? We all do it. Get to some of the surprising roots of that. We had a great one. We have a little clip of it out there on social media. Of course, if you want the full thing, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. Also, Options Oddities had another banger one on Friday. We got up to a whole bunch of fun business on Friday on Options Oddities. So if you're not checking those out, you are truly missing out. And speaking of missing out, we are missing today on the old OB, the uncleest of Mikes. No Uncle Mike Tusaw from St. Charles Wealth Management. He is apparently in the midst of some technological issues. So apparently in the hinterlands of Chicago, they forgot to pay their internet bill for this week. But nonetheless, we are joined by the greasiest of meatballs, Mr. Mark Sebastian from OptionPit.com. I introduce him now, listeners, because it is time once again to commence our broadcast week in high style with a little bit of the old 80s wrestling trivia. Here we go. All right, everybody. Welcome to a little bit of 80s wrestling trivia. A fun way to just kind of get the blood pumping, kick off the trading week, have a little bit of fun, wake everybody up here. And we've had a lot of different fun talking about various WrestleManias recently. We talked about WrestleMania 1. We talked about the special guest referee they had at WrestleMania 1 Muhammad Ali. And now let's fast forward to WrestleMania 2. Not quite as an iconic of an event. Most people don't really remember WrestleMania 2 the same way they remember WrestleMania 1. Then, of course, it doesn't help that it's bookended by these two titanic events, of course. WrestleMania 1, which kicked it all off, kind of created the modern wrestling infrastructure as we know it now today. And then, of course, WrestleMania 3, which had the iconic moment of Hogan slamming Andre, which is still, if you watch something WWE today. That is the first clip they show at the beginning of every show because it's so iconic. It kind of ushered in the modern era of wrestling, brought it into the mainstream. Everybody go crazy. 93,000 people, Pontiac Silverdome, all that madness. But in between those, sandwiched in between those two pivotal events, was a lesser heralded event called WrestleMania 2. And it was interesting for a couple of reasons. It was kind of a simulcast event in two locations, in Los Angeles and right here in good old Chi-Town. And the Chi-Town portion we are going to focus on this week, listeners, because it featured yet again another special guest referee, this time one who is near and dear to the hearts of many Chicago athletic fans, shall we say. He was the special guest referee, one of two, I believe, for the Battle Royal that occurred in the Chicago segment. Mr. Uncle Mike, sir, excuse me, I apologize. Mr. Greasy Meatball, who was the iconic Chicago athlete who was the special guest referee for the Battle Royal of WrestleMania 2, sir.
All right. Can we kill the Jeopardy music?
Is it hurting you? I'll turn it down. I'll turn it down for you. How's that? There you go.
Much better.
All right, go ahead.
All right. So we had a special guest referee. Who were the opponents in the match?
It was a battle royal, so it was kind of an everybody. I don't know exactly who was in it. A whole bunch of people.
I remember in the battle royal, wasn't William Perry in it and Jimbo Covert and a whole bunch of people. So going along those lines, I don't remember who exactly it was, but I'm going to say if it's an iconic Chicago person, then I'm going to say Jim McMahon.
Interesting. Tell you what, I'm going to be charitable because Uncle Mike is not here. I want you to get some points to catch up. So what I'm going to do is I'll give you a half-point bonus shot, and I will give you the mother of all hints. He just passed away last week.
Oh, Dick Butkus.
Yes, Dick Butkus was the special guest referee.
Dick.
Yes, that was a crazy one. The night that the Bears got their first win in, a year? 14 straight games, 51 passes away, and the Bears get it done. So that was kind of an interesting, weird time. A weird time for WrestleMania 2 as well, listeners. Dick Butkus, special guest referee. Did you know that? Very timely one as we keep on rolling right on into a little bit of the old trading block.
It's time to break down the latest topics, trades, and trends in the world of options. It's time for the Trading Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Trading Block. Today is a day where we could use probably a dose of Uncle Mike out there, a dose of optimism, a bit of a ray of sunshine, because the markets on the weekend certainly was not full of a lot of it, of course. I don't think anyone went into this weekend saying, what the world really needs is more tanks rolling. Yeah, that's exactly what we got this weekend. So a lot of people were looking to the markets to be pretty dire today, and they were early on. We saw a sell-off earlier in the session, the S&P breaking back through 4,300, getting down to looks like around 4,285 in that range before, as it seems to be inevitable these days, the worm turned and the market started to rally. And now, as we're kind of coming into the start of the show here today, we're back up north of 4,300, 4,306. So the S&P off about 0.05%, but it's threatening to turn unched at any moment, listeners. The Dow also similarly unched, the NASDAQ off about 0.33%. That means our vol friends kind of treading water. They were literally unched from the Thursday show not too long ago. As of right before we kicked off the show, they're about 1/10 of a point to the upside. So pretty much unched there. VIX at about an 1840, right when we kicked off the show. VVIX at a 95. That puts it literally unched from the Thursday show. VXX 24, so that's back up about 3/4 of a point. I'm sure if we re-racked that now, probably come in a little bit. UVXY 17 up about 0.6 of a point. SVIX giving up the ghost a little bit, back down to 26.5, down a little over a point, about 1.15. And good old UVIX 3 3/4 was flirting with 3.5. I needed to be below that, but up about 1/4 of a point right now. Again, I'm sure if we re-racked this one as well, maybe giving up a little bit of the ghost as well there. So a lot to unpack. Mr. Meatball, everyone kind of expected a dire start to the week, and we kind of had that ever so briefly. It seems like, at least for right now, that is fading. What is catching your eye out there in this, shall we say, dire kickoff to the markets this week, sir?
Well, this is kind of normal behavior. We get kind of a shock. It affects stocks initially, but then people start to think and go, is this really going to be a big negative for markets? And we get a little bit of a recovery. Volatility typically does stay a little higher. A little recovery in the bond market is actually helping stocks a little bit. But really, and then the big move is in energy. And, you see the pop in XLE and, of 3%, and you say, okay, well, now that makes some sense here. We can, we can kind of react to that.
Yeah, we were just talking about energy, as of course we do a lot these days on our TWIFO program, talking about what the options were pricing in over there in WTI. It seemed like after threatening the triple-digit level, a lot of people were talking for a triple-digit. Of course, we saw a retracement over the past week and change, and we were looking at maybe WTI settling out where it was, hovering in the low 80s. Seemed like we had reached equilibrium, at least from an option skew perspective. Then, of course, all these events intercede over the weekend. And, of course, anytime there's tanks rolling in the Middle East anywhere, you're going to see WTI and just crude in general take a nice lift, and that's pretty much what we saw out there these days. Have you guys, I know recently you've been talking a little bit more about energy and oil. Any intriguing trades? You guys been slinging a lot of XLE out there lately, Mark?
Yeah, we actually had some components of XLE on a trade going into this event. I mean, it was, this is not the way you want to win on a long oil play, I will say that, but oil was a little oversold anyway, so this maybe makes a little, that's exasperating. I think the move in oil is how kind of down in the dumps oil already was.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people were calling for that triple-digit retest of oil before the end of the year. Then, of course, we got that sell-off I mentioned, and it seemed like we were kind of just vacillating in oil. Oil was waiting, just gently adrift, waiting for the next catalyst that would send it in one direction or the other, and apparently that direction right now, at least for the time being, of course, is up. Listeners, of course, stay tuned for TWIFO coming up a little bit later this week, where we get into all of that interesting material. I got a feeling energy is going to be back on the dot. Energy is just inescapable lately. Nat gas moving. People, Israel obviously not a big producer of crude oil, but nat gas reserves in that region, and so that's always popping that off. And again, of course, whenever there's tension in the Middle East, people worry about disruptions to supply of crude, so that sends things skyrocketing there. So I have a feeling, we obviously haven't run the report yet, we have to wait till Thursday for that, but I have a feeling energy going to be making it onto the show yet again. So if you're a diehard for another complex, hopefully you like a little bit more energy, because it just seems to be muscling its way onto the show week after week. Something's going on, a hurricane, labor strikes on the nat gas side, something to drive one or both of those, WTI or nat gas, or frequently both, into our movers and shakers. Again, every week, you want to see it for yourselves, listeners. You know where to go, cmegroup.com/TWIFO, TWIFO. Once you're there, you can run those reports whenever you want. So if you want to go check right now what's going on in WTI or nat gas options, have at it. It's all there for you completely for free, because we like you folks. And of course, we'll dive deep into all that fun on Thursday. Let's dive deep into what's lighting up these markets right now. And again, we could use a little dose of the uncleist of mics here on the show. Again, just for a little bit of refreshing optimism. I'll do my best to play the Uncle Mike role for you, listeners, and be my ray of sunshine that I normally am. In terms of paper, VIX never looked askance at some tragic events as a way to kind of drive some paper. And we saw some of that happening earlier in the session today. VIX putting up some numbers today. 555,000 contracts on the tape. Not the most explosive day we've seen, but also not nothing either. Usually probably coming in to a day when the bond markets are closed. A lot of people are off anyway. You probably would expect $150, maybe a couple 100,000 contracts on the tape. Probably a sleepier start to the week than we're seeing right now. The ADV 839. So as you mentioned on vol views, that continues to move in the right direction for folks who like a lot of liquidity and a lot of volume in VIX land. I mean, again, you're threatening 850,000 contracts a day. That is nothing to sneeze at. Seems like we are on pace to hit that again today. SPY at 3.9 million. But again, I usually say it's over 4 to somewhere around 4.3 million. Again, we are running it a little bit earlier in the show today because there is no Uncle Mike. So if we were usually probably about 5 minutes later, as we normally are, you probably would be right in that sweet spot of 4 to 4.3 million. As we are right now, listener, SPY 3.9 million. The ADV, again, also looking robust 8.64 million out there. The S, right where we expect it these days, listeners. The S is kind of like clockwork these days. 1.5 million. The ADV north of 3 million now. 3.16 million. Man, that is a lot of paper to go up in the S. And you know what? Just for fun. I don't know why I keep doing this to myself, because the answer is always the same. But I'm going to do it yet again. I'm going to run the top 20 most active contracts in SPX right now. Let's see if we can find one nugget, one morsel of activity that is not expiring today, and the answer is still clearly no. If I expand it to the top 40, I'm going to guess I probably find somewhere around 5. And let's see, I see 1. So we're looking pretty light today, listeners. Only 3 contracts in the top 40 most active in the SPX are not expiring today. Again, just speaking to how fundamentally transformed this product has been over the past year since all this zero-day stuff started popping off. And again, you don't need any additional evidence. And looking at the numbers we got out of OCC, everything was down last month compared to September of 2022. So equity options, ETF options, futures, you name it, except for index options, pretty much carried on the back of this zero-day boom, listeners. Let's go out to small caps, the IWM flavor out there right now, listeners. Small caps managing to break green, up about 1/10 of a point right now, 0.05% in small caps land, but managing to put up about 300,000 contracts right now. Their ADV 1.1 million. That seems like a pretty distant goal right now, but again, the session is young. And our old friend, the Qs, 1.9 million, the ADV 3.85 million out there. Let's go on to the most actives out here for today, listeners, see what's lighting it up. And again, we're kind of checking in on these a little bit earlier than we normally do, so a little bit lighter than we normally would expect, because it only costs you right now 137,000 contracts to break into the top 10. That's pretty freaking light, to put it mildly. But then again, we are running it roughly 5 to 10 minutes earlier than we normally do. So missing a little bit of that volume, but even still, maybe we'd get up to $1.40 by then. Number 9, that gets us to good old Softy. Let's see where our friend Mr. Softy is hanging out. 137,000 contracts for number 10. 328.10 up right now, about 85 cents. So managing to buck the trend after they hit it down to 323.18. So they were coming for it earlier in the session. And then now they've rallied it pretty much exactly $5 from there. So nice little recovery out there. And Softy, good for number 10. Number 9, we're going out to the king of the apes out there. AMC, 140,000 contracts. AMC kind of unched right now, maybe slightly off about a nickel. It's at about a 56% range on the day, hanging out right around 9.25 right now. And again, good for the number 9 spot out there, listeners, with 140,000 contracts. Number 8, it's Rivian. Everyone who was out there loading up and picking in our poll just about a month ago, the AUG, I think it was 25s, I forget the strike. But yeah, not looking great for those, because the stock 18.5 right now, off another $0.50 today. You know the saga with Rivian on the year. It's off 13 handles, or about 41%. Was trading 31.5 a year ago. Got up to about 36.5. That was looks like in the October, November timeframe. And then since then, they have come for it. Of course, it has recovered from its lows of 1168. Hit those back in April of this year. So I guess glass half full approach. It's still up from where it was in April. But it also got up recently to about 27.64. That was in the end of July. And since then, no bueno out there. Number 8, 148,000 contracts listed. Number 7, let's keep it in the A name. Let's go out to the chip zone early. It's AMD, 166,000 contracts for number 7. AMD, 105.85, off about $1.40 today. Man, wow. A names coming fast and furious right now. Keeping it in the A tech names. Number 6. I can't recall the last time we've seen Apple this low. But again, listeners, this is kind of an aberrant show, running these numbers a little bit early, but Apple doing a whole heck of a lot of nothing right now. 200. I can't remember the last time we saw Apple with 200,000 roughly contracts on the tape. That's nothing. That's anemic. That's a rounding error for Apple. That's usually somewhere around what it could cost you to break into the top 10 on a decent day. 282,000 contracts on the tape today for the fruit company. Apple up about $0.25 right now, trading 177 3/4. On the day, it got down to 175.80, so they have popped it about $2 from that low. The high was a little bit north of here, 178.07. So, wow, yeah, Apple doing a whole heck of a lot of nothing right now. My goodness, I'm curious. On a day when Apple is doing nothing, what is being done? Listen, let's go find out really quickly. What is the hot thing on a nothing day? 28,000 of the 177 half calls expiring this week. That is the big trade out there, followed by 24,000 of the 175 puts. So both of those opening. So if past is prologue, a lot of very near-dated paper. I guess gun to your head, listeners, you had to buy one of those right now. 175 puts expiring this week or 177 half calls in Apple right now. Which one are you buying? Hey, the calls, they are slightly in the money. So maybe that's your winner chicken dinner. But you got to buy one. It might be a fun little flash poll. We had a fun one over the weekend about OATLY as well. Maybe we'll get to that a little bit later. That might be a fun little flash poll for this week as well. Gun to your head, you got to buy one of those. I got a feeling the Apple Bulls will win in that one, but you never know out there. Number 5, listeners, let's keep the train rolling. Let's go out to the artist formerly known as Facebook. Now this is Meta. 293,000 contracts on the tape. 317.30, up about $1.90 today. And again, number 5, still kind of a sleepy day for Meta. Number 4, we're going out to the Amazonians. Man, A tech names just dominating our tape. AMC, like, are they tech? Kind of. AMD, of course, Apple, the Amazonians. It's just endless with these. Amazonians number 4, 334,000 contracts on the tape. 127 and a third, off about 2/3 of a buck today. Looks like the low came 124 and 3/4. They have rebounded from that nicely. But also, actually, they're at about their high for the day right now, 127.35. So interesting out there for the Amazonians. Number 3, you know it's got to be here somewhere, listeners. Usually it's somewhere in the top 3. Today it is number 3. It is NVIDIA, the tip of the AI spear. Still selling off about $8, 449 and 2/3. 450 and a half was the high, the low 443 out there, trading 449.85 right now. Number 2, keeping it in the AI realm, listeners. This is Palantir, popping hard today, 1740. They have a lot of action on the defense side, as we know, listeners. So this could be seen as a boon for them. 16 and a quarter was their low today. 1783 was their high, trading 1738. So kind of a buck from their lows, but still off their highs of the day. But a nice little pop here for good old Palantir out there today. And again, good for the number 2 spot. That's pretty high. And again, aberrant numbers. We are running these a little bit lower than usual, or earlier than usual, I should say. And the number 1 spot, listeners, you know it, you love it. It's Tesla, 713. Again, that's light. That's roughly half of where it normally is. Usually this time of the day, 1.3 million is what we see with Tesla. I'm not sure if we re-rack that now, it might be closer to 1 million, but 255.40 right now, off a little over $5, about 512. The low for today, 252.05. The high, 256.62 out there. Of course, they made headlines recently, slashing prices yet again. More issues going on with them in China. So a lot of interesting things. As the day that ends in Y, there's going to be some vol in Tesla, and that amounts to 713,000 contracts on the tape. If you're looking for hot earnings action, well, you might have a few this week, listeners. After all, it's not complete sleepy season out there. Tuesday, a little bit of beverage vol, not Coca-Cola, not Warren Buffett's favorite. Let's go the other half. Let's go to the Pepsi Challenge with PepsiCo on Tuesday. Thursday, we've got some airlines coming back. We got Delta, we got Domino's, a pizza, and the Walgreens Boots Alliance. We just talked about them on Options Oddities. Some interesting put action out there. So we'll see how all that comes to pass. Easier for me to say. And then Friday, listeners, right back into the teeth of it with some financials again. JP Morgan Chase, PNC Bank, Progressive, and Wells Fargo as the wheel goes around again out there. Listen, let's hit a few of those right now before we get into some of the oddities. And I'm sure the Meatball has some fun odd paper he's found over there and all his various flow analysis that he's probably going to want to share with us as well. Let's go out here first to PepsiCo. PepsiCo tomorrow before the bell, 160 and about a quarter is where it was trading when we ran our reports. Listeners, again, brought to you courtesy of our friends over there in OATLY. Check them out, ORATS.com, the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. That straddle in PepsiCo, man, that thing is looking, I think the technical term is super juicy, listeners. It's $5.50 right now. In the past, they've moved $2.30. More than 2x for PepsiCo? That's a lot of juice for Pepsi. And they sell some juice. Wow. I think I need to go investigating what's popping off in the land of PepsiCo. Let's go out to the airlines over the last few years. Definitely some bastions of volatility out there. Delta Airlines, the 12th before the bell, $37 even. When we ran this report, they were pricing in $1.79. In the past, they've moved to $1.15. So, wow. A lot of juice on the tape here in these first two listeners. Let's go out to pizza. Domino's a pizza. 12th before the bell, $3.41.5. They were pricing in $22.65. In the past, they've moved $19. So, again, a lot of juice being priced into these first three names here, listeners. Wow. Let's go out to the Alliance, Walgreens Boots Alliance. 12 before the bell, $21.80 is where they were trading. They were pricing in $1.56. In the past, they moved to $1.23. More juice, not quite as much more as the other names we're talking about, but still. More juice appears to be the order of the day as we're heading into this next cycle here. Let's get out to the financials, see what they're pricing in, listeners. Citi, 13th before the bell, $40.50. They're pricing in $1.65. In the past, they've moved to $1.48, so slightly more juice, nothing earth-shattering there. And JP Morgan, 13th before the bell, $145.10 is where they were trading. They were pricing in $4.83. In the past, they've moved $4.05, so that's a fair amount of extra juice in good old JP Morgan. So just in this first rash of earnings we have upon us in the early blush of next cycle, listeners, it seems like the smart money is betting on a little bit more action to come, which is funny because people have been saying that for the first cycle of this year and then the second cycle of this year and now heading into the third cycle of this year. And so far, we've been disappointed every time. In fact, last season it ended up right around par, 101, somewhere in that range, and our long-term average is 99%. So anyone's guess whether we're going to outperform that. At least so far, the smart money in the early betting appears to be yes, listeners. You want to see those for yourselves, only one place to go, theoptionsinsider.com. Click on the Options, News, and Articles tab to begin your journey to the dark side as we continue our journey right on into the Odd Block.
It's time to break down the most interesting, unusual, and downright questionable options activity that's been identified by theoptionsinsider.com. It's time for the Odd Block.
All right, everybody, let's get weird. Let's get wild. Some might say we even get a little whimsical on this section. And hey, I think we all could use that right now. Let's kick it off. Before I get into our paper, Mr. Meatball, I know you folks over there in the land of the pit are always crunching some fun flow and spotting some intriguing nuggets that caught your eye. Before we get into our paper, anything catching the eye of the Meatball these days as we head into the Odd Block, sir?
Yeah, so far the biggest trade of the day is in VIX. A trader bought the November 14-15 put spread. Looks like about 50,000 times for 16 cents. I like that play a lot. The next biggest trade, do you have this MDLZ trade, Mark?
We do not have at it, sir.
June 55 puts, 190 buyer. So, you know, these consumer staples, consumer non-discretionaries, they've been taking so much pain. And here we have a trader going out to June and buying further out of the money. Just continues to look a little ugly. And, you know, I don't know what's next for it, but it don't look hot. And then do you like your TPX reports?
I love them. We are going to get to those in a second. We'll get to those.
Oh, so we got TPX.
And I'll get to those. Cool. Let's dig into the MDLZ a little bit first, too, because that's interesting.
Yeah.
They kind of just popped off right as we're kind of doing the show here. As you mentioned, MDLZ, you know them, listeners, ticker symbol MDLZ, trading $63, about $63.10 right now, off about a quarter right now. Let's see, on the year, a year ago, they were trading $55, so they've had a nice $7.50 pop, or about 13.5% on the year. The high came earlier this year in May of about $78.50, so they have given back quite a bit from their high there, but still net up on the year, even if the last week and change have not exactly been bangers for them. They were trading $68 just end of last week, and now they're back down to 63. So a rough couple of weeks, but a decent year net out there. And as the Meatball points out, it does seem like maybe somebody loading up on some continued downside to come. 15,000 of the June double puts, listeners, the June 55 puts going up for $1.90, lifting the offer. That was stock was right about here, 63.06, and these went up. Again, these went up not too long ago, listeners. And that's about a 27 vol. So, Mr. Meatball, as you pointed out, looks like somebody wagering on the continued downside, or more likely someone sitting on a whole bunch of stock and concerned about some downside. Either way, what are your thoughts on these? You like these, Mr. Meatball?
I mean, I almost like it as a sale better than a buy, just because Mondelez is, so, has been kind of punished so bad. I guess there was this report. Did you see this about the Ozempic versus snack food thing?
I've seen a lot about Ozempic, not specifically about snack foods lately.
So there was a big report on Bloomberg about how Ozempic and these ones are killing the snack food business because people are taking, they take the drug and then they're not hungry for.
They're not munching the chips.
Cheetos.
It makes sense. If everyone's getting injected on this weight loss drug, maybe they're not sucking down the Cheetos or the Milky Ways or all that kind of stuff.
That's an interesting little tidbit out of that I had noticed.
Reminds me of back in the day when everyone attacked, Krispy Kreme and everything during the Atkins era, remember? And everyone just crushed those because no one's eating carbs anymore. All these donut names. Go figure, they're still here. All these years later. They are. Atkins maybe is still a thing, obviously. It's transformed into keto and everything else, but maybe not quite the vanguard of dieting that it was back in those early days. But you're right, I don't love these. It's $1.90. It's pretty juicy. It's buying a put right at the 52-week low. Never my favorite thing. Never. Yeah, I think if I had a gun to my head, again, my favorite thing in our questions of the week, gun to my head, I might lean that way as well. I have to get digging a little bit more about Mondelez if I want to load up on a bunch of it there. But just looking at this chart right now, I don't hate it. I don't hate the sale of those. What do you like? Listen, you like buying those? You like selling those better out there? I got a feeling I know how you folks lean and probably lean towards the selling. Let's get out to some of your favorite, Mr. Meatball, the TPX reports, a.k.a. listeners, Tempur Sealy International. You know them, you love them, maybe you hate them in the mattress world. Is there a more opaque business on the planet than mattresses? They go out of their way to just obfuscate everything. There's no matching model numbers and serial numbers, so you can never price shop and all these kind of things. It's still the last vestige of old school salesmanship on the planet. And I know people are trying to disrupt it, but yeah, it could use a lot of disruption, to put it mildly. But that's a conversation for another day. Tempur Sealy, ticker symbol TPX, trading $40.88, off about a dime today. Let's see, on the low came at 40 1/4, so it has rebounded from the lows today. On the year, a year ago, it was trading 26 3/4, so a nice rebound here in Tempur Sealy. Man, it's been a banger year for them, up 52, almost 53%. A little over 14 handles. They rallied it pretty early, got up to 44 1/4 on February 2nd. So like a lot of the market listeners, it seemed like it kind of hit its initial apex on February 2nd. So it got carried right along with the market. Then it kind of drifted lower, got down to about $35 and hung out there for a while until July. Then in July, I started kicking it up into higher gear again, got up to about, looks like it's high for the year of $47.70. That was on September 1st. And then since then, it's given up about $7, back down to about $40.89 right now. And looks like our eye of Sauron spotted out there again. The old super juicy line in the sand puts. In particular, it was the October 37.5. So I said we're trading about $40.90 right now. So these are a little over $3 out of the money puts, listeners. Looks like paper probably selling these for around 15 cents. I say probably because it was a bit of a terrible market. No bid. There was no bid for these, not even nickel bid. No bid at 35 cents. Those are the kind of markets we wish we could have made back in the day as market makers. The stock was a little bit lower, actually, 40 1/3. So, again, probably putting fuel to the fire. They probably sold these. They got a nice pop in the stock if that's the case. And the earnings are after October expiration, so no earnings in these. Mr. Meatball, it's clear that you noticed these. What are your thoughts on this super juicy sale in your favorite TPX?
Yeah, it was interesting. It's had a really rough slug. So, it doesn't surprise me that someone come in and say, you know what, I like my Sealy Posturepedic or my Tempur-Pedic bed. I'm going to sell some puts here. Inexpensive, line in the sand, looking to pick up a little bit of yield, no earnings. It makes sense to me. It's not insane.
It is not insane indeed. Again, we like more than 15 cents usually, but these don't have long to live. So you can't expect $5 for these puts either, listeners. But intriguing stuff out here. Speaking of intriguing stuff, let's go pay off some of the intriguing stuff we've talked about on the show recently. This time, listeners, let's go back all the way to the heady days of August 24th, the dog days of summer. It was a wild time, listeners. Options volume defying all logic, flying fast and furious. It was a crazy time, August, listeners. In particular, August 24th, we were talking about Foot Locker. Good old ticker symbol FL, listeners. Let's see. Foot Locker on the year. Let's see. A year ago, it was trading $32.21. And right now, trading $20.40. So no bueno for them. Off nearly $12 or 33% on the year, listeners. Yeah, it looks like the low actually came at about $14.84 not too long ago. So they have rebounded from that. They're up to about $20.50. I guess if you want to look glass half full, they've rebounded about 15% over the past month, so not quite as dire. But when we were talking about them back in late August, listeners, we talked about somebody liking themselves a little bit of the old upside in good old FL. They came in and scooped 4,198 of the SEP 20s. They paid a quarter, lifted the offer for these bad boys. The stock at the time was $17.32. And let's see, there were no earnings in this. There were earnings there are earnings coming up on November 17th, so they obviously had already just had their earnings. And then they came in, they bought more, 2,198, so 198 is apparently the magic number with these, for 32 cents this time. Then about 2,000 for 32 cents again, and then they kept going, total of about 14,000 on the day, listeners. And again, the stock was $17.32 roughly when they started buying these, and they were buying the 20 calls for prices from a quarter up to, looks like around 33 cents, 14,000 times. The stock moved, the stock rallied, but it didn't quite get there. It didn't quite get to the 20 handle, listeners. The stock closed on expiration $17.76. So $17.76, an excellent year. Not quite an excellent price for these call buyers, listeners. Of course, they didn't wait that long to get the heck out of Dodge. They bailed. It's like a week and change before expiration. They decided, you know what? There's still a bid for these things, as nominal as it may be. Let's get what we can and get the heck out of Dodge. They dumped 9,300 of them for a nickel, and then 9,300 more for another nickel or so. So they pretty much bailed on all these for about a nickel. So we took a bath on these, lost somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 cents for all these. So on that first print we saw, or actually we add them all up that day, 14,000 of them, you're talking around 350 grand. If there's more volume, it may have come in subsequent days, in which case they lost even more on these. But just in the initial roughly 14,000 we profiled on that day, you're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of $350,000. Mr. Meatball, sir, what are your thoughts on this? Apparently they swung for the fences and they flew too close to the sun in Foot Locker, sir, and they got burned.
Yeah, you got to take your dollars when you get a chance, and you got to be careful with that. So I'm with you.
They got out. I can't fault them for that. They got out for a nickel, so they got out for about as low as they possibly could. But they still
it's true.
They managed to salvage some of their money, but not quite the bonanza out there. Sometimes, listeners, you swing for the fences, and alas, it does not come to fruition. But it does come to fruition, listeners. Some of your feedback. Let's get out there now. A little bit of the old mail block.
It's time to take your seat on the All-Star panel as we read your emails, tweets, Facebook messages, website comments, and much more. It's time for The Mail Block.
All right, listeners, let's get out there. A little bit of the old mail block fun. Speaking of fun, we had a little bit of fun over the weekend, as I am wont to do, listeners, when I am doing some shopping. If I spot OATLY in the wild, one of our favorite/least favorite holdings for our Options Oddity show, and I see it well represented on store shelves, I will take a photo of it and I will send it to One Rock Lobster just to tweak him a little bit, and also myself, because I am in on the OATLY train now, for better or for worse. So I saw a bunch of it in the store over the weekend. I sent it to the Rock Lobster, and that kicked off a little bit of fun on Twitter, listeners, where we asked you folks just quite simply, which level will OATLY hit first? As of Friday, it was at about below 80 cents. Let's see, where the heck is OATLY hanging out right now? 69 cents. So yeah, looking great, looking robust. We asked you quite simply, which level will OATLY hit first? We got optimistic. We said $5 or $0. So it's going the way of the dodo, or it's going back north. This one just makes me laugh, because that's what else can you do at this point, listeners, but laugh at it. Mr. Meatball, sir, if you had to vote, which way are you voting? Which way do you think our audience is voting? $5 or $0?
Audience probably saying $0, and I would say $0 as well.
You're not down on the OATLY train, huh? You're not down on the delicious.
I'm not anti-OATLY. I just think that they would have done themselves a favor to get acquired 2 years ago.
I wouldn't mind them getting acquired. Let's say at the nice, robust price of $5 a share. How about that, right? That'd be great.
Sure, awesome. Mark. That could happen.
Awesome for all involved.
It could happen. I don't know that it will happen, but it could happen.
What's that? $25 a share? You say? Wow, that would be exceedingly generous and very nice of them to do such a thing. But yes, our audience right now, actually surprisingly optimistic. Mr. Meatballs, might surprise you. Just ticking again as we speak. 57.1% choosing $5, Mr. Meatball. So they are on the OATLY train. They are here for a little bit. And, it was $3 not too long ago. So it's not like $5.
No. I mean, people like it. It's good. It's just, I'm not sure it's a standalone business. I think it belongs with some sort of, Coca-Cola, or like a Pepsi could buy it, or like a big dairy producer, somebody like that.
Yeah, that's probably the future for this thing. It's a shame. They created a category and then got kind of beat to the punch in their own category. Now, if you go to the store, you see a bunch of oat milk and other dairy alternatives on the shelves, and a huge entire freezer full of them, but maybe only one or two are OATLY. So they created a category and then got kind of pushed to the side in their own category. So we've seen other players that happen to, TiVo and others. Sometimes first mover is not the best thing to be. Look at Apple. Apple's always second or third mover, and then they dominate a category. So, yes, interesting stuff out there for OATLY. So a little bit of weekend fun. Our actual question of the week from last week, listeners, was along the lines of the IPO trend. It's getting a little hotter again these days. People are saying maybe IPOs are back. Maybe we're done with all that SPAC nonsense from a few years ago. Either way, we said to you folks, which of these upcoming or kind of new listings are you most excited to sink your options teeth into? Gave you four choices: ARM, Instacart, Reddit, or the newly combined WWE/TKO, or /UFC, which is TKO. Of course, we were just talking about WWE at the top of the show. And not surprisingly, since you folks all have chips on the brain, 60% of you saying you're most excited by ARM, even though ARM not exactly lighting the world on fire post IPO. It's down 14% so far year to date. Trading right now 54.69, managing to pop a little bit today, and it's up about 2 3/4 or a little over 5% over the past week. So it has rebounded from its low of 49.85 up to about 54, almost in 3/4 right now. But still, no bueno for the year. But dominating our poll, Instacart and WWE/TKO tying for number 2, 15% each. And no love for Reddit, only 10% for Reddit. Interesting stuff out there. Speaking of interesting stuff, let's get to this question here from Ronaldo. Man, this is an epic one, Ronaldo. I will do my best to answer it with what we know right now. He wants to know, quite simply, what is the latest on spikes? And a lot to unpack there. Listen, you may have noticed they are no longer on our Volatility Views show. That's because the folks at Spikes and MIAX have been embroiled in quite the legal brouhaha over there. In fact, we wanted Simon to come on our Pro Q&A to talk about some of this stuff recently, but even the lawyers stepping in on that front. It's just illegal quagmire. You know, whenever you play in the VIX realm, SIBO might come knocking eventually. That's kind of what happened. You have to go back a little bit to kind of set the tale with what happened. You remember when Spikes listed, they were approved by CFTC, then got that approval revoked right after they launched, and they had to kind of go back and delist for a while, then relist. So there's been a lot of regulatory rigmarole going around this product for a long time. Then there was, in November of 2020, the SEC issued an exemptive order to allow Spikes to effectively keep trading as a futures contract as opposed to what they term a securities future. It may sound like a distinction without a difference, but trust me, in the regulatory world, that's a meaningful distinction. And they did that, the SEC said, to foster competition. They wanted some sort of alternative to what they termed the incumbent volatility product in the market, a.k.a. VIX. They said facilitating greater competition among these types of products. They should provide market participants with larger access to a wider range of financial instruments to trade and hedge the S&P 500, and it should lower transaction costs. SIBO, obviously not a fan of that ruling. They sued to block that exemption, and that's what happened back in July of this year. The U.S. Court of Appeals in D.C. sided with the SIBO and ruled to vacate that exemption. So the exemption that allowed Spikes to trade as a futures contract as opposed to a securities future was effectively vacated. So Spikes had to, well, it seemed like it was going to have to halt trading. MIAX, of course, they have lawyers too. They countersued this, and they came out and they are appealing that ruling right now. They do have an appeal in place as a result of MIAX's appeal. The Spikes were supposed to effectively be delisted on November 1st. That no longer applies. They're awaiting the results of this appeal. So now the earliest date at which Spikes futures could be delisted is January 1st of next year. So obviously, as you might imagine, they have a lot to say on this front too, saying that there is a government-sanctioned monopoly in the volatility space. So allowing this, the court has created significant market disruptions and investor harm and so on and so forth. This quote-unquote Healthy Markets Association. I love the names of these various industry and trade groups out there. But long answer to a very involved question is Spikes was listed. It met regulatory hurdles off the bat. SIBO sued early on to try to block them from entering that space. MIAX existed, and the Spikes existed on this exemptive order from the SEC, which dates back to November of 2020. SIBO was finally successful in vacating that order in July of this year, and now MIAX is appealing that. So depending on the outcome of that appeal, we'll see if Spikes can continue trading or if it will be delisted, and maybe they'll have to retool it or somewhere along these lines. So once again, the lawyers are dictating what's going on in the world of volatility, which is never a good thing. Mr. Mark, a lot I just laid down there on the regulatory side, which is no one's favorite side of the vol space. But any thoughts on what's going on over there, sir?
Yeah, I think it's good for competition. I'd like to see something come out of this. And, I think it's one of those where it could be good for both parties if they didn't just kind of fight it. I'm a big fan of the SIBO, but I'd love to see this this come together. Obviously, I'd love to see Spikes become a truly viable product.
Yeah,
I think that'd be great.
Just more products for vol traders to trade is a good thing. That creates more interest in the space. It creates a bigger ecosystem. I was down to FIA. I saw some people from Eurex. I told them the same thing. I say, hey, let's get your V stocks up and running. We want something that has a little bit of European flavor in the vol space. That would be great. More products for people to trade at the end of the day is a good thing. So there you go. Who wrote that question? And that was Ronaldo. Good question, Ronaldo. A detailed one outside of some of the scope of our show sometimes. You don't get into the regulatory side too often. But hey, Uncle Mike's not here, so we had a chance to play as we keep on rolling and go around the block.
It's time to tell you what we'll be watching on our trading screens until the next episode. It's time for Around the Block.
Whew, that was a lot of regulatory talk. Let's instead shift gears now and look ahead, see what we're keeping an eye on in the markets. Mr. Meatball, obviously there's a new macro wind potentially buffeting these markets around in the terms of what's going on the geopolitical front over there in the Middle East. Right now, the markets, it looks like, still managing to mostly shrug that off as we're kicking off, or I should say as we're ending the show here. We have now turned fully green, very firmly green, listeners. S&P up about 0.5%, Dow up about 0.5%, and NASDAQ up about 0.33%. So as a result, our vol friends retreating, S&P now, VIX back below the 18 handle out there. So at least for right now, Mr. Meatball, the market shrugging all this off. What are your thoughts on this response to what we're seeing out there, and what else are you keeping an eye on for the rest of the week, sir?
Well, like I said, I think we'd be up more if this thing hadn't happened over the weekend. These macro events tend to kind of get brushed aside. If there's a trend, obviously they're going to still affect oil, still affect the dollar. You're going to see some effect on overseas markets. But near term, I think you got to be bearish volatility and somewhat bullish the stock market here for a little bit until we run into CPI.
I am indeed bearish vol, so we'll see what we get by the end of this week. It looks like UBIX, already back to about a 3.5 level out there right now, so giving up quite a bit from the start of the show. So we shall see what's going on out there right now. But at least for right now, listeners, it seems like our markets are once again in the mode we have come to expect from them, green, to kick off the week. Unfortunately, that music means we've come to the end of this Uncle Mike-less episode of the old OB. But you know what, listeners, if you're not tired of me droning on, this time not about regulatory stuff, don't worry. I'll be back immediately after this show, so all you folks hanging out in the live, don't have to wait at all. Immediately after this show with a little taste of the old crypto rundown for you folks. I know you were starved last week. FIA was in town. I had to head on down to some meetings and events down there, so no crypto rundown last week, but we are back breaking it all down for you immediately after the show today, so look forward to that. And, of course, you want to check out what our buddy Mr. Uncle Mike has cooking. Only one place to go, stcharleswealth.com, the place to go. Give him a follow on the old Twitters, at Mike Tusaw, Tosaw, all one word. And Mr. Meatball, sir, if you got anything fun popping off in the land of the pit this week you want to plug, have at it. And then B, if folks want to learn more, where should they go? What should they do?
Yeah, come to optionpit.com. We're posting content there every day. Come check us out. We've been talking about, today I kind of gave you a primer that I thought things would go up on the day today, and they have. How much more we're going to go up, I don't know, but we're trying to put out helpful, actionable content every day here at optionpit.com. And
I saw Mr. Rock Lobster. He did his up on the day tweet last week. He was very proud of that.
That was impressive.
I did not expect that either. I mean, his tweet wasn't impressive. Not exactly the best in terms of grammar and spell checking, but the timing of it and the sentiment was correct, yes.
Yes, indeed it was.
So he did dive in there. When I was with you, I did not think we were going to turn green. But hey, never underestimate the bull at the end of the day. And if you want to reach out to said Rock Lobster or the Meatball or anybody else over there, the land of the pit, optionpit.com, the place to go. We got to get on out of here, but don't worry. I'm back again immediately in your ear holes if you're listening live with a taste of the old crypto rundown. And then, of course, back again tomorrow with a double dose. You got a pro Q&A coming at you, as well as the advisor's option. So a double dose of awesome content coming your way tomorrow. Wednesday, of course, back with the old OBC. Might be an interesting one this week. They're always interesting, I think, but this might be especially interesting. So stay tuned for the old OBC on Wednesday. And then back again on Thursday with the Flow Master. Another episode of the Option Block. Stay safe out there, everybody.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.